All right. I changed my mind. If you're taking 2 hours on personal development, you need it. So do not stop doing that 2 hours.
I'm trying to become the person I need to become to make this podcast successful. This podcast is not going to make itself successful, especially the way you guys are doing it. I've got to become more. I've got to become the guy to make this podcast to the next level. Otherwise, we're just going to be, straddling for years and years.
If walking on the beach will help you get us there, I'm all for it.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate. Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 23 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, and I have to specify because we have a special guest this week, other Ashley. Welcome, Ashley Kehr. How's it going, Ash?
Good. Thank you guys so much for having me. I have to tell you, I've not been this nervous in a long time to be a guest on a podcast.
Well, that's why the alcohol's there. So
you guys are like one of 3 real estate podcasts that I actually listen to on the regular. So I'm very fangirling right now.
You're on one yourself, so I assume that's one. What's the other one?
Oh, God, listening to my own voice? No, thanks.
Why don't you give a quick 30-second synopsis of how we found you?
Okay. Well, you found me because I am BFFs with your Ashley, but we met through real estate investing. I'm the co-host of the Real Estate Rookie podcast for Bigger Pockets. I host a Real Estate Rookie boot camp with them, and I'm also the author of Real Estate Partnerships with Tony Robinson and the author of Real Estate Rookie 90 Days to Your First Investment. But I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I have 3 little farm boys, and I invest mostly in Buffalo. I've only done 1 deal out of state, but mostly long-term buy and hold, and then some short-term rentals too, and a couple midterm rentals. And
unfortunately, a Buffalo Bills fan though, so it's we have to put up with that. And by the way, I don't know if you're seeing Jay's setup now that you're starting to pop the Bigger Pockets books out. You got to take note and start to put them in your background on the wall there.
There you go.
You know what? I do have the canvas ones. I just haven't hung them up yet.
That's exactly what mine are.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're supposed to do the plugging at the end of the show, not at the beginning of the show. And usually we like to plug Ashley Wilson, but
trust me, I hear.
All right, Mauricio. Well, why don't you go next and you get us back on track?
Thank you.
Kyle,
Thank you for that.
No, stop. No. What's the name of the show?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Ashley, did you come prepared with a nice drink for us?
Yes, I did. I own a liquor store, but unfortunately I do not keep my house stocked very well because all I had was some Grey Goose and some rum. So I made myself it's a little bit of Grey Goose, and I had some Kahlua in the fridge that was probably expired. So I added that in. I put in a little chai tea latte, chocolate milk, and white milk, and then cinnamon and nutmeg. And then I used my milk frother from my espresso machine to froth it. And then I put a cinnamon stick in it.
I feel like this is one of those things where you're like, hey, Google, I have these ingredients in my fridge. Tell me a drink that I can make.
I almost did post it on my Instagram. It's like, here's what I have. What should I make? But I didn't. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Okay. My Google's responding because I said it. All right, Jay. Well, no, we're going to Mauricio next. Get us back on track here, Mauricio.
I know. We got to get the show back. So I'm doing great. I am drinking I'm going with a Justin Cab 2020. Good little cab there. And I'm already, as you can see, the bottle's almost, more than half done. Though I'm inspired by Jay and I've been drinking for a little while. And so that should be fun a little bit later on. My cap would be crooked if I had one.
Well, and then we got to follow it with Jay, who's already showing off his beautiful. I don't even want to guess what that is. Drink that you have over there, nice and fruity looking.
Yeah. So my wife said, "I'm making you a drink for the show tonight," and I said, "Great, surprise me." And so I have this nice martini glass. It tastes. There's definitely a lot of vodka in there, and I'm guessing some strawberry puree or raspberry puree. I'm guessing it's just some fruit and some vodka because that's what it tastes like, but it's really good.
You have a great wife that she lets you just blame this on her every time, but there's only so many times that you could show up.
Excuse me. She even made me look at this.
Aw,
She made me a note from
Oh.
Epic Wifey Cocktail Crafts Inc.
that is really cute.
See?
Fair enough. I got nothing on that. I'm just going back with the Woodford Reserve. My dad just came to visit. He crossed the Canadian border into the U.S. up in Nova Scotia. And anybody who crosses the border, I'm sure Ashley does, you cross the duty free, you get real cheap liquor. And apparently there was only 6 bottles to choose from. It was such a small border crossing and one of them was Woodford Reserve. So that's how I ended up with Woodford Reserve this week. All right, should we get into this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So I know what everyone's thinking. It's been far too long since we've had Jay do an economic update. So you are in luck. Since our last update, we've had a Fed meeting, some jobs numbers, a significant change in the 10-year treasury. So Jay, is there a reason for optimism now that we've kind of seen all these things happen, or are we still down in the dumps with the economy?
Well, I don't want to talk about this as an economic update because I think people are getting bored of economic updates. So let me just give you a headline that I think people are going to like. And the headline is, I think mortgage rates are likely to come down in the next couple of weeks. The reason for that is our economic update, but I'd like to kind of focus that update today on mortgage rates and why I think it could be really good news for investors, for homeowners, because I think there's a reasonable chance we're going to see mortgage rates really start to drop over the next few weeks. Now, why is that the case?
Can we get more specific? When you say drop, are we talking like they're back down to 3%, or are they like what are we talking about here?
No, but what we've seen is over the last couple months, rates have they've topped 8%, and over the last couple of days, they've come back into the 7s. And I think it's reasonable that we could get from the high 7s to the low 7s over the next week or two if some of the trends that we're seeing continue. And so why is that the case? Well, the big reason is the last thing that Kyle mentioned before he handed it over to me was that 10-year treasury yields are down, and 10-year treasury yields, doesn't really matter what they are. They're treasury bonds. It's what treasury bonds are paying. But the important thing is that 10-year treasury yields are very highly correlated to mortgage rates. Where 10-year treasury yields go, mortgage rates tend to follow. And what we've seen over the last couple of months is these 10-year treasury yields have gone through the roof. They topped 5% for the first time since 2007. And like I said, mortgage rates followed, and we saw mortgage rates go over 8% as of a week or two ago. But there's reason to believe that mortgage rates or treasury yields are likely to come down. And there are 3 reasons for that. Who wants to take a guess what those 3 reasons are?
Well, number one would be that the 10-year is generally in a growth and inflation expectation. So they're expecting growth and inflation to be going down.
Can I also guess that there was no reason for them to be high in the first place? And so
I mean, that's debatable. But to Mauricio's point, the treasuries often reflect where investors think interest rates are going to be in the future. So the 10-year should to some degree track where investors think interest rates are likely to fall over the next 10 years on average. And so the big thing that we saw, or one of the big things that we saw last week, was that the Fed had a meeting. Jerome Powell got up to speak and said, we're pausing rate hikes. We're not pausing, but we're not doing a rate hike this month. And in some of the things he said, it led us to believe that they may be pausing rate hikes for good for this rate hike cycle. We may not see any additional rate hikes over the next few months. And so basically that gives investors reason to believe that we may see the top of interest rates right now.
Well, and he was convincing enough that there's only a 12% chance the market believes of us hiking again ever for the next couple of years. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, the market has basically priced in at this point, no more hikes before we start seeing some cuts. And so investors are thinking, okay, that's going to bring down the next 10-year average of where interest rates are. And so basically that's the first thing that drives down treasury bonds, just the fact that we think, or investors think, that the Fed has paused. The second big one, and this is probably the biggest one, but the Treasury last week basically released this thing called their quarterly refunding statement. And quarterly refunding statement is basically just a statement where the Treasury signals how much they're going to be releasing in bonds over the next several months, and what types of bonds, short-term bonds, long-term bonds, mid-term bonds. And so what they said was they're actually going to be releasing fewer bonds than they had expected, or that investors had expected, and that they'd be releasing much fewer bonds in the 10-year range. And so that means that we're not going to get this big boom in bond supply over the next month or two. And so that's basically led investors to think, okay, we're probably going to have some demand for these bonds, which is going to drive yields down.
Can I call BS on that right off the bat? Because if you look at the size of the treasury market, which remember, it's a worldwide market. It's one of the deepest markets ever. I don't know what the exact numbers are, and then you figure out how much, whatever they're going to be issuing or not issuing compared to what the total market is. It's nothing. It's peanuts. People always think
you can't deny the effects though. Like they did release quite a bit more than usual because they had to catch up after that whole debt ceiling debacle.
But what percentage of the total market was that?
And then all of a sudden, like it correlated with the run up in the 10-year treasury and then run up in the 20-year treasury and run up. So like it was directly correlated at the same timing. So yes, you can make that argument, but the facts are proving the opposite.
And to answer your question, Mauricio, it's about 1/3%.
The reason that rates go down is because people are buying. There's a higher demand for those safe treasury, 10-year bonds. And why would somebody buy a bond versus anything else? Is because they're scared crapless of what's coming down the pipeline. So instead of putting their money in crypto or the stock market or in real estate or in businesses or whatever, they're going to go flock to a safe asset like a 10-year bond, and that drives up demand for the bond, which in turn turns yields lower.
At the end of the day, bonds are supply and demand, just like any other asset out there. And the fact that the Treasury is saying they're going to release less new supply than they previously indicated, that puts a constraint on supply, and that's going to drive demand a little bit, and it's going to drive yields down. And so, I mean, couple that with the fact that more revenue came into the Treasury this quarter than expected from taxes, and coupled that with the third fact that Congress hasn't passed a funding bill for Israel or Ukraine in a while. And so they're spending less money. And so between making more money, spending less money, and issuing fewer bonds, it's driving yields down. And so
Can we also give a huge shout out to Mauricio here, who literally last episode was like, the Atlanta Fed is predicting 2.3% GDP, and all the time right after they never revise up, they always revise down. So they're probably going to revise down to 1% or 1.5% or something. And then literally the week after, the Atlanta Fed came out and said, we're revising our GDP down to 1.2. So I want to give a huge.
It was like a thank you, appreciate it. It was actually a little at 4, and then it went down to 2, and it's just the same thing every time.
So that's the third reason why we're seeing Treasury yields go down. We're seeing the first clear sign of some pessimism about the direction of the economy. So Treasury yields is basically what bonds pay. They go down as demand for these bonds goes up. And so when people buy more Treasury bonds, the yields go down. And what we're seeing is people are buying more Treasury bonds. Why do they do that? They do that because Treasury bonds are a safe place to put their money, and people are starting to get a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit more concerned about the economy. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Big one is the jobs report that we saw last week. We're seeing a lot fewer jobs being created. Jerome Powell got up after the Fed meeting and basically spoke about how they're focused on their mandate of full employment, which leads a bunch of people to believe that maybe they're worried about the employment situation. So that's the first kind of maybe piece of the puzzle of indicating that our economy may not be as resilient as we thought. We may not be getting that soft landing. Personally, I think the Fed is recognizing that they may have overcorrected, but that soft jobs report last week is scaring enough investors that they're moving money out of the stock market, they're moving money out of real estate, out of other asset classes, and they're starting to move it into Treasury bonds. But at the end of the day, again, people buying Treasury bonds, pushing yields down, the end result is something we're going to like, and that's mortgage rates likely going down. So will Treasury bond yields continue to go down over the next few months? Who knows? But we're definitely heading in that direction, and I think that's reason to believe there could be good news for us as investors.
Jay, when you say like people are switching their money from real estate or whatever to, bonds or other investments, is it actually like people or individual, or is like the majority of these decisions when people switch to a different asset to invest in, like a brokerage, because how many, I can't, I really don't know that many people that are actually managing their own investments. So it's like a lot of the control of where people decide to invest and how these things affect based on like these brokerages actually, instead of like individual people.
Yeah, when I use the term investor, I kind of use that very loosely. When I talk about investors buying treasury bonds, we're actually talking about countries, governments. We're talking about institutions. We're talking about large insurance firms and hedge funds, and we're talking about those organizations that are putting hundreds of millions and billions of dollars at work. Not saying that people like you and me and well, not me, but maybe Kyle, aren't buying some treasury bonds here and there, but we're not moving the market. Yeah, it really is. It's governments and large institutions.
And don't forget, there's also the issue of, and I think that's more to do with the run up, not necessarily the current, reduction, but liquidity is tight, and so there's a lot of countries who are sitting on dollars as their reserves, and they need dollars. There's a liquidity shortage. They need dollars. The central banks need dollars. So it's nothing nefarious, but they may just end up selling. And of course, they keep their dollars in the form of treasuries. That's how they keep their reserves. So if they are in need of dollars because there's not enough dollars circulating around the world, then they end up selling their treasuries so they can raise cash in dollars. If you're a country like Japan, who's trying to defend their currency, well, they're selling their treasuries so they can buy dollars, so they can buy their currencies and defend their currencies. But there's a bunch of reasons why a central bank of a particular country needs dollars, and if they're short on dollars, they need to sell their treasuries to get dollars and provide it to their economy. So that's more about why the treasury would have gone up all the way to almost or just around 5%, and maybe the need for that has subsided a little bit, so they're not having to sell the treasuries as much, or maybe now they're buying them back because whatever liquidity they needed, they fixed.
Yeah, and a lot of it also, I mean, when you talk about countries, it has to do with their trade balance or imbalance. When a country sells a lot of exports, they're bringing in a lot of U.S. dollars. And typically they want to do something with those U.S. dollars, and they're gonna place them back in the U.S. to buy bonds. And so because they don't want to necessarily just hold on to those dollars. And so as China starts to export more or less, that's going to impact how much they need to buy or sell of U.S. Treasury bonds. And so it's actually a lot of variables at play here. But at the end of the day, pessimism and optimism in the market goes a long way to determining which direction those prices move.
Yeah, the biggest shift I saw was I think people stopped believing in this whole resilient job market. You alluded to it, and I wanted to bring up. I was listening to JP Conklin again from Pensford, and first of all, he's the same person who I keep saying, like, we always talk about this unemployment rate, about we have to see this unemployment rate get up in order to fix this, when really the unemployment rate is like an awful leading indicator of a recession. Unemployment rate doesn't actually spike until after the Fed has already started cutting and we're already in the recession. So the fact that we're right now keep saying like, oh, we need to see this unemployment rate go up is still crazy to me. But he quoted this, I think it's called SAHM, SAHM. It's Claudia Sahm,
stay-at-home mom.
She coined this rule that basically says that when the 3-month moving average of the unemployment rate climbs 0.5% off of the prior year low, then 100% the recession ensues right after. And so if you look at our low was at 3.4%, like we're at 3.8, like 6 or something. So
no,
like so we're like literally on the cusp of that, and 100% of the time a recession is followed shortly after. So if you want to just look at other indicators of, okay, like we got something looming, we talked about it last week about our predictions, then that's the first time I've heard that, and I thought that was a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, I sent you guys in the text thread earlier in the week a chart that Bill Gurley posted earlier this year about how when the money supply contracts and it's only done it a few times in the last 150 years in this country. But every time the money supply contracts, we tend to see a major recession or depression follow. And we're seeing for the first time in a really long time, nearly 100 years since the Great Depression, that the money supply is starting to contract. Now, you can argue that the conditions aren't exactly the same, because the reason that happens is it tends to lead to banking failures, and banking failures lead to other failures in the economy. And we have some resiliency and some backstops in the banking sector right now with
you can't preclude my arguments that I used in the text thread about why this is different. Come on, Jay, that was my argument.
that was your argument. But
well, no, so basically what he was saying was that the banking failures are what's going to lead it, and I'm saying, well, the Fed, like, the reason there's banking failures is because these banks have all these long dated treasuries, and they're going to have to start selling them off, which is going to lead to losses, and the Fed's taking care of that. They basically just open the checkbook and say, hey, you have any long dated treasuries that have problems, you can loan them to us. We'll just give you $1-to-1 dollars back in terms of liquidity. But that's why I also said, like, that expires March. So if all of a sudden they're extending that in March, everyone's going to be like, well, okay, the only reason these banks aren't failing is because the Fed is propping them up. We got issues, and then you're going to see a bunch of problems in the stock market, in my opinion.
Is that not obvious to everyone that the only reason that there hasn't been a single bank failure since, it's because they've got an unlimited amount of lines of credit?
That's not at all obvious to me. I mean, we've seen that program has put out $110 billion, which I'm not saying isn't a reasonable amount, but that's smaller than a single SVB bank by half. And there's no reason to believe that if they didn't backstop those banks with that $110 billion, that those banks necessarily would have failed. So I've been saying since March that I don't think that there's any major banking issues ahead. I could be wrong on that.
All right, you think they're not going to extend it in March then?
I think they might, but I think it's more a precautionary measure and not the result of feeling like they're stopping a catastrophe.
Well, I have a question. Isn't one of the major things during a recession that liquor sales skyrocket? And Ashley owns a liquor store. So are you seeing liquor sales right now start to go up higher than normal, or are we still not quite at that point yet?
You know what? You're going to have to come back to me, because I'm going to have to actually pull it up, because I honestly don't even look at the liquor sales at all, because my manager takes care of that, and I'm just out of the loop. But I will look it up. I'll look it up right now. So continue your conversation and I'll pull it up.
Well, let's be clear. She owns a liquor store outside of Buffalo, New York, where basically it just went from summer to winter over the past week, from like 80 degrees to 20 degrees. I guarantee you liquor sales are spiking in that area.
And I think the word outside is generous. Like outside, like you're implying outside as in like she's right on the cusp of Buffalo. Like it's a bit of a hike. So
I'm getting a new delivery of drink. Ooh, round 2.
Oh yeah, let's switch over here.
Haven't finished round 1, but I guess I'm gonna have to really.
Could you at least pick up the drink and drink it versus like leaning over and taking a sip like a girly girl?
Okay, so here we can take a guess as to what was the top seller of the day. What bottle of liquor was the top seller of the day?
Ooh.
Bud Light.
It's got to be wine or liquor. It's not wine. It's a liquor.
It's a liquor.
In Buffalo, I'm going to say Kahlua.
No.
It's got to be a dark liquor for sure.
Like some vodka, probably vodka.
No, it's a Jim Beam Red Stay.
I just said that. Did you hear me? I said Jim Beam.
Oh, he did.
You got to go with like the cheapest like liquor, and that's got to be the top seller.
So just looking at what's today, Tuesday? Yeah, like our sales are actually pretty good for being a Tuesday.
There you go. You heard it first. Leading indicator. We're heading into a recession. Liquor sales are up. So that's what.
No, we're heading into winter in Buffalo.
Maybe I need to start paying more attention and be more active so I can start taking more profit out of here now that it's increasing instead of my business partner taking everything.
Well, no, that's actually a good segue into how much Ashley delegates things here, because we could talk about VAs and AI a little bit here, because there's been a lot of chatter about how AI is going to revolutionize industries by significantly reducing staffing and system costs and stuff like that. But for many real estate investors, they've already kind of reduced those costs dramatically by using virtual assistants. I know a lot of people who swear by virtual assistants in their systems right now. And, critics will say that things like property management, investor relations, negotiations, they can't be handled by VAs. But there's others that just absolutely swear by it. And I know, Ash, that you've gone through kind of a back and forth with virtual assistants where you had them and then you kind of, went off them a little bit. And I think you're now back on that train. So where are you right now with virtual assistants? Are they awesome again? Or are they still, ready to be replaced?
Okay, well, first we got to go back because I actually looked up the data for you. And last year, so like Jay said, we're a very small liquor store. So sales for all of last year, 2022, were 212,000. And as of date today, we're at 192,000. So with Christmas, Thanksgiving, the holidays coming up, we will definitely surpass what we did last year.
Even more of an indication, recession, here we come.
Okay, but virtual assistants, I just started using them this past year, mostly just over the summer. I started hiring, and the main reason for that was I'm building out a property management company. So when I started as a real estate investor, well, even before that, I was an accountant. I worked at a CPA firm. I hated it. I quit in the middle of tax season, and I just wanted to get knocked up and be barefoot and pregnant on the farm. So that's what I did. I quit my job.
Quitting in the middle of tax season on
that's how much I hated it. It was so bad.
They definitely don't talk to you anymore.
I was like, I want to quit my job so bad. And so I figured it out, and I'm putting my 2 weeks notice. And they're like, usually we don't even have people work 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, great. And they're like, well, actually, we still need you because it's tax season. So I did have to stay the extra weeks. But then after that, I started working for another investor who was like, I need help getting organized. And what he meant by that was being a property manager for this 40-unit apartment complex that he had. And I knew nothing about it. And so I built a property management company for the ground up where I was the actual property manager, started buying my own properties with partners, and everything went great, except I was stressed out all the time. I hired, actual people to come into the office and help me do work, and it was expensive, and it just it didn't work out. We had a lot of turnover for leasing agents, for admin people. So I got sick of it. 2020, right before COVID hit, I hired a third-party property management company. I was like, this is amazing. I don't have to do anything. Well, I learned that no, you do have to do something. You have to be an asset manager still. So by the time I figured that out, I found a lot of mistakes the property management company was doing. Over the course of 3 years, we kept them on. And finally, last May, we terminated our contract with them. Well, that was where it was the decision of, do we go and find another company, or do I take on the management again? So I knew that if I was taking on the management again, I had to create way better systems and processes and rebuild it. And within that time frame, those 3 years, there was definitely a huge advancement in property management software too. And I had just learned so much more from the real estate investing community. So I decided I was going to build my property management software. So actually, we hired a property manager to work part-time. And so that was in May. And we actually just let him go 2 weeks ago because we really don't need him. All he actually was doing was answering the phone. Everything else is pretty much done virtually. He was a lot more expensive. We were paying him $25 an hour, and our virtual assistants were paying $6 to $10 an hour. So a huge cost savings. The only thing that he was doing that was in person was doing showings. But we've now set it up where showings can be virtual, and then the move-ins and the move-outs, but maintenance has to be there anyways to do the move-in and the move-out inspection. So maintenance is actually just being there to meet the tenant, show them the apartment, give them their keys, things like that. So we eliminated that position from having virtual assistants in the background doing everything else. And one amazing thing is that if you get the right virtual assistant and they're trained well, they will do exactly what you say. where with our property manager, it was like, make sure you're taking notes, make sure every time a tenant calls, you're, putting it into our software, you're tracking it, all these different things. And virtual assistants are not afraid to ask questions where they will message me right away, get it taken care of, and keep going. So I've had great success with them so far. And right now we have two that are in the property management company. And right now that's pretty much all that we need.
Are your virtual assistants domestic or international?
They are in the Philippines, both of them.
Got it. And do you have any issues with time zone differences? Because Philippines is a big time zone difference.
So my one virtual assistant is strictly just receivables and payables and some various other tasks. And she just works whenever she needs to. Just whenever there's work, she'll go in and usually check every day. And if there's bills that need to be inputted, things like that, she'll do it. So she's just on her own time. The other one works from 9 a.m. Eastern until 6 p.m. Eastern. So that is her time frame. So she's working pretty much through the night.
And by the way, that's not uncommon. Like, especially in the Philippines, there's almost like another subculture out there where a lot of U.S. based companies require that their Philippines VAs work U.S. hours, and so they've just that's just kind of used to it. And there's like literally this whole sub community now where things are open at the random, like at 3:00 in the morning, because that's when people take their lunch hour. And it's like literally they've just flipped their schedules to accommodate the U.S. because a lot of people do insist on having them on U.S. schedules.
Yeah. Yeah. The first VA that I hired was through VPM. It's virtual property management. And you guys know Steve Rosenberg, his business partner that he had built out his property management company with, Pete Newbig. He actually started this company, and they're already kind of trained per se. The virtual assistants take courses that are all about property management, and they have like different associations with different softwares and things like that. And so you can go into their database, say what you're looking for, and you can hire based on, different certifications that they have taken through their company VPM. And so it's almost like a matchmaking service, but it's kind of like Upwork or Fiverr too.
So what are the biggest limitations you've seen with them? Because I would say the number one criticism of virtual assistants is basically that you can't have them answer phone calls. To your point, you had the one employee who their only thing was to answer phone calls, and a lot of people don't trust someone in the Philippines to answer phone calls or take anything that is phone call related. Are you having them do things like that, or are you having to kind of work around that?
Yeah, they don't do any phone calls. Everything is through, like, we use AppFolio as our main software, and they do messaging. You can do text messages right through their software, and then they do email communication. Any phone calls, the property manager was taken, but we've been like super diligent about like pushing residents to. We also have a call center through AppFolio for any like service or maintenance request. And so even if they just need a form to fill out, they can just call that number and they'll input the data that the tenant needs. And then it comes in as like a work order, a service request on our end. And then it gets assigned to the VA will assign it to, excuse me, maintenance, or whoever needs to take care of it. But as far as talking on the phone, they don't have to do that. And right now, while we're in kind of this hold as to see how well this goes, maintenance is actually taking any phone call.
Yeah, and we have a couple of virtual assistants for our businesses, and we've had mixed reviews on them in the sense that we've had a couple that are awesome, and we've had a couple that didn't work out. And it gets into the same thing with this work from home from people is you're constantly having to figure out are they actually working? How much work are they doing? And the language barrier and the time zone difference makes that just a little bit tougher to manage. But if you find a great one, it can be great. But the thing that we're considering right now is, okay, if we're not having them answer the phones, we're basically having them do all this administrative work. Is this something that we are just going to replace in a couple of years with like artificial intelligence? Is this just a stopgap that's happening right now? And we've had the internal discussions there. I know that some people that were in the investor community they're trying to develop AI property management. So I'll open it up to the group and say, like, do we think this is, I know the legal space, Mauricio, a lot of people are talking about how AI is going to reduce the legal workforce significantly. So are virtual assistants and cheap labor, overseas labor, is this something that's just going to completely go away because we have artificial intelligence on the cusp?
I mean, I think, virtual assistants, I mean, they don't just have to do the property management, right? That's like they can do so much more in terms of stuff that you sort of low level tasks that, if you can get a virtual assistant for like $1,400, $1,500 a month. So like all these little pesky little things you're doing, whether it's, literally emails or calendars or travel booking and all that stuff, can an AI product do that? Maybe, but I don't know what I've been doing lately, and it's worked really well for me. Is just you just audit your time, right? You audit your time, you figure out what you're doing, what you're spending your time on, and you just got to identify those items that are just low value for you. There's Dan Martell, and if you guys seen this, Dan Martell's got a great book called "Buy Back Your Time." He talks a lot about his buyback rate and what do you make a year, and there's a way to figure out how much you make a year, and then you divide that by 4 to figure out what your buyback rate. And everybody has a buyback rate, right? So if you're making $100,000 a year, your buyback rate might be $15 an hour, $16 an hour. And if you're making more money, your buyback rate might be $50 an hour. But if you're doing any work that's higher than your buyback rate, you should be offloading that to an assistant or a virtual assistant. And it might just be stuff like organizing email, like going through email and putting them into folders and just separating it, getting rid of spam, travel arrangements, or it might be bookkeeping. I know it wouldn't be, Ashley wouldn't want to do her own bookkeeping. So hire somebody to do bookkeeping, whatever it is that you're doing right now that isn't the highest and best use for what you're trying to build is something you should look to offload. And a lot of people say, well, I can't afford an executive assistant or an admin or this or a property management person or this. And I think people don't realize that there are people out there that for $1,500 a month, full time, $1,500, you can have a full-time person working with you. And I guarantee you can find $1,500 worth of work if you're auditing your time and figuring out exactly what you're spending your time on. All those little low value tasks, you can be offloading that to a virtual assistant or somebody to help you sort of buy back your time.
Mauricio, you are the third person today that has recommended that book to me.
That's one of the most, I put that book into one of my most transformational books I've ever read. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The One Thing, Traction. I'm going to go Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. If you're not following him, that guy's a stud.
The book on flipping houses.
I don't know about that.
No, so to Kyle's point, I don't think that VAs are ever going to be obsolete because there are a lot of things that VAs can do that I don't think AI is going to be able to do easily in the near future. But any task that is repetitive and that can be handled by a CPU, meaning any task that can be done sitting in front of a computer that's repetitive, I think will be taken over by AI in not necessarily the far future, but the near future. And there's a lot of automations that are being built right now. It's not so much whether the AIs can do these tasks. It's how easy is it to implement these tasks using AI, and that's where we really need better tools. But there are a whole lot of people out there that are selling the picks and the shovels, and so I think the tools are going to evolve pretty quickly. And what we're going to find is that we're going to find these virtual AIs, or whatever you want to call them, are going to be taking over a lot of the tasks that real life people, VAs, are currently doing.
Jay, I think that's going to be a huge part of it as to like how limited it is that AI can take over virtual assistants, because right now, look at just social media management. You have to cut the video and crop it out. So if we took this, stream right here, you send it away and somebody has to cut out the little splice that's going to be your Instagram reel. Somebody has to edit it, put graphics on it, put things on it, and then somebody has to write a description for it, and then somebody has to post it to your Instagram page. There are all AI generated things that can do that automatically. It's the piecing it together and somebody who knows how to use all of those tools to make that happen. And that's where you're seeing these companies coming out as to like, we will do your social media management, because they've gone and they've picked all these different things where for that company, it is automatic. They just throw your video into their AI tools and do it. And I think where kind of that standstill will be from AI growing rapidly is people learning how to actually use it and maximize it and to put it into that process.
And I think people like AJ, who's obviously we're missing here today, maybe a little bit, not too much.
We're not
but,
missing him, but he's not here.
He's got what, 37, 42, 16 VAs, I forget, assistants. But like, I think that the AI can, to Ashley's point, if you need 5 or 6 people to do a particular job, you might be able to get all of them done. Almost like the checkout, right, at the supermarket now. You got the automatic checkout, so you still have one person who's kind of monitoring all 6 to 8, things. And so if you've got an issue, that person pops in. You can have, instead of having 6 or 7 people, you could replace 5 of them with AI, and then have that one person who can now kind of do the job of 5 because they're basically just coordinating and doing all that stuff. So that's kind of how I would see the AI place. Because to your point, Ashley, you need somebody to kind of implement, especially maybe at some point we get there, but right now you still need somebody to sort of usher the process along. And you can definitely use AI tools to have less people needed for the same job. You don't need 5 people. You can do it with 1.
I was just going to say, I think one difference that I've noticed personally is that one thing with my VAs, what I've really liked is that they follow everything to a T. And so I would build out, like, I have the leasing one and just a leasing playbook as to, like, this is the exact process that happens. And one thing that I've really enjoyed with having her is that she points out these, little loopholes or these steps that just don't make sense or would be more efficient a different way. Where if you were using AI, they would exactly follow it to a T, and I wouldn't have kind of that second opinion, and there would more likely be errors, I guess, because of my input was not 100% streamlined. And how many investors or anybody can go and make a process and it be 100% perfect the first time they made it? Maybe Kyle, but not a
Well, so real world applications though, if we go back to the property management, there's actually a guy that we all know very well on the down low is developing an AI for property management and currently beta testing it and going through the process. And he claims right now that 80%, so you want to talk about fielding phone calls. The thing about AI right now is they're getting it to the point where it could actually talk on the phone. It can respond to people talking on the phone and be relatively fluent to the point where, it might be even better with someone than someone with an accent. He's gotten it to the point where it can field and take care of 80% of all calls to a property management company, and believes that very soon it'll get to over 90%. So that's just taking care of, like, immediately, like, even not like Appfolio. You mentioned that there's a call center for Appfolio. Like 90% of those calls aren't going to be needed because the AI is going to be able to take care of it, and probably not show empathy to a screaming tenant or something like that. But for the majority of calls, it's going to be able to take care of it. So where does that leave the rest of human interaction? I think that's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I wish I had this email popped up still, but I got this email yesterday and it was from a real estate investor. It's just like his drip campaign, and it was about a new AI that he had created that would negotiate with sellers for you. And in the email talked about, like, take away the uncomfortable feeling of talking with sellers and use our AI bot. And he had built it through Bot Builders was the company he built it through. And it was specifically to do creative finance deals to negotiate it with a seller for you.
You know what he probably did? He probably found a book on negotiating real estate. I don't know if there's one out there, but there's probably a book on negotiating real estate somewhere. And he probably fed that into the training model for the AI, and it just listened to that. So it must be perfect then, because I read this one book on negotiating real estate and it was flawless.
I don't know if that book exists, but I'm guessing if you go to Amazon and type in negotiating real estate, you'll find out real quickly if it does or it doesn't.
You know what? I bought this house in Eden, New York before, and I read that book and I negotiated a great deal.
Eden, New York. Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful city. Ashley actually bought my in-laws' house a couple of years ago in a small town, Eden, New York. So the power of relationships right there. Yeah. So a lot of people talk about the benefit of AI being that you can basically cut costs because you don't have to hire people. You don't have to even hire VAs for a few bucks an hour, but it's more than just the cost. I mean, it's also the convenience. A lot of us don't like to manage employees. A lot of us like to have employees that can work 24/7. A lot of us like to have employees that don't take sick days and don't take maternity leave and don't take off because they have to go to court because they got a speeding ticket or whatever it is. And the benefit of AI is that it really is that employee that can work 24/7 that you don't really have to manage. And so I think if you think about it, let's say you have a task that you have to do 15 minutes a day, or your VA has to do 15 minutes a day. Doesn't sound like a very big task, but they're spending 60 hours a year doing that 15-minute a day task. 60 hours, if you can build an AI tool that can do that task in less than 60 hours, you're going to retrieve your costs in less than a year. Plus, you're not paying benefits. Plus, you don't have to worry about sick time. Plus, you don't have to worry about time off. Plus, you don't have to worry about them not working nights and weekends. I mean, there are a lot of benefits to AI, and I think that there's going to be enough incentive out there for people to build tools and to hire people to build AI apps that can handle whatever their specific needs are, because at the end of the day, they're going to save money.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs had put out this thing about that AI technology would boost the GDP by 7%, was
Yeah.
what they estimated. And I saw this Instagram reel today. It was, I can't remember who put it out, but it was talking about robots in warehouses, and that how it's only used by like 2% of actual warehouse companies. And that it's going to continue to grow because nobody is working in warehouses. The turnover is so high. And what's going to end up happening is that these robots are going to be the future of working in warehouses because, like you said, they don't need sick days, they don't leave, and it will reduce turnover, and it'll be so much more cost effective for these warehouses to have these robots in there that are doing the position of literally like just moving stuff and filling orders.
Isn't that what Amazon's doing already? I mean, doesn't Amazon, I mean, I've seen those videos.
Amazon must have been the company that was.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that already. Amazon's already got all these, like, it's really choreographed and it's all GPS and stuff. And so these little things are picking up the packages and going over here and going over there. And they're even packaging it up because, like, it's pretty crazy. But no, that's definitely good stuff. I got to get on, apparently I need to get on Instagram. That's one of my next,
You already got the reels going, Mauricio. It'd be nice. It'd be easy for you to.
yeah. If you guys think I should be on Instagram, just give me a follow and I'll get on there.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's my fault. We got too much into the weeds on AI because we could talk for days. Maybe we'll have to do a separate segment on AI. But AI was in the news for a crazy amount for a while there, and it's kind of fizzled. And we have a couple wars going on, but the major news story going on is NAR. And it started off, NAR's kind of had a tough year going here. They had some, they had the class action lawsuits, and then sexual harassment claims from the board there. But the recent major hit is they actually got a $1.8 billion judgment against them and other major real estate brokerages in regards to collusion and price fixing, to the point where they were being called a cartel. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but that's the scuttlebutt in the news. So many people believe this is going to absolutely change the industry, turn it on its head, have major downstream consequences. And while others believe it's just going to be kind of minor changes in business as usual. So to get some clarity, let's hit up our legal expert over here, Mauricio, to figure out what's actually going on.
Yeah, 1.78 billion, and it could actually get tripled according to some antitrust statute there that theoretically get tripled. But dude, I actually found some really fascinating stuff. I'm sure you guys have heard about the story, so I'll touch on the story a little bit. But I'll give you one thing that I found out that I thought was fascinating. But yeah, so there's a class action lawsuit basically, and they sued the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and then Home Services of America, which is one of the Warren Buffett subsidiaries, and then Keller Williams, which is a huge, I don't say conglomerate, but I mean, they I think they own Century 21 and a lot of these other big brokerage houses. And basically they were held liable for conspiring to keep these real estate commissions artificially high, and therefore causing sellers, primarily sellers, all the class action people represent about 230 sellers of real estate in like the Missouri area, Illinois, and Kansas, I believe, Kansas City. But the way the whole commission structure is structured, they had an issue with that. And apparently a jury pretty quickly agreed and offered and basically gave 1.78, and that's punitive. So obviously that wasn't the actual damages, but they had punitive. But dude, did you know, and let's go through how it actually works and what they were alleging, but this is something I did not know, which I thought was fascinating. Did you guys know that the word realtor is trademarked by NAR? So that in order for you to be able to be called a real estate realtor or a realtor, you have to get permission. But I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but that was like something.
I think all three of us have had our license at some point in our lives, right?
Okay. Yeah. So I haven't. So that was like a shocking thing for me. And that's really the key, because that's how NAR is able to control or dictate some of the terms, because in order for you to be calling yourself a realtor, and I think there's the last thing I saw was 1.6 million realtors, you have to be a member of NAR. So that's really how it all gets tied together. But as you guys know, the way it typically works is it's just tradition, and I've just kind of like accepted it as just the way it goes, right? And anytime you sell a piece of property or buy a piece of property, the seller is responsible for paying the seller's agent fee, which is generally about 5 or 6% of the purchase price. There goes Kyle's hat, by the way, at whatever the moment. If you guys want to comment on that, drop a comment, and Jay will send you one of his 15 books that he has. But so 5 to 6% commission, and then the seller then generally shares that commission with the buyer's agent. And the argument was, hey, it doesn't really allow us to negotiate, our fees as a buyer. Like, I'm just stuck paying 3%. It really is paid by sellers. And the key and the argument was that, here's the issue, right? Because you need to be a member of NAR in order to use the word realtor, right? And then you're bound by the terms and conditions and the code of ethics and everything that A&R has. And so the NAR handbook and the code of ethics basically there was an allegation that they basically required, let me read it to you, it required the home sellers to make a blanket offer to any potential buyer's broker as a condition to listing the property on MLS. So in order for you to list the property in MLS, you had to have this arrangement with the buyer's agent to share your commission. And the allegation was that, hey, that's basically a conspiracy, even though NAR said, hey, no, you can negotiate there's nothing that prevents you from negotiating these rates, which maybe is true if you're not a member of NAR. But again, I don't know what percentage of people want to be called a realtor, but I think it's a pretty big deal to become an official realtor. And I know it gives everybody clout to become a member of NAR. And so that was the allegation, and the jury agreed. The jury agreed that that was the case. Now, one of the arguments I thought was interesting, I want you to get your take on this. I thought it was a BS argument. I got really ticked off about this. This really got me going, because one of the arguments, and I'm not saying whether this is a conspiracy or not, but one of the arguments was that, look, these days, we don't need buyer's agents. We can do this ourselves. We can go on the internet and we can find all this information. And I don't need a buyer's agent, right? And my answer to that was, no, you can't. The only reason you can do it on your own is because you get all this free information from these Zillow and Redfin and all these websites, and they give it to you for free, because then there's an expectation that you're going to use their services, or if you're going to buy the property, they're going to get their 3% commission. So if they're not going to get paid or compensated that way now because of this new rule, which, by the way, is going to get appealed and it's going to go on for years and years and years, so this is nowhere near being done. But if that's their business model, where you get access to Zillow, access to Redfin, access to all these companies and get all this data for free, because, hey, I can do it on my own. Not really. You can do it on your own because you're going to end up paying the 3%. But if you're not going to pay the 3%, then I bet you those websites will no longer be free. Now, in order for me to research Zillow and Redfin, you're going to have to pay a membership fee, or I'm going to have to pay something in order for that, because that's their business model. Their business model, it's not really free.
Well, you look at Zillow. That's how Zillow makes all their money, right? They don't make their money off of the listings. They make their money off of charging agents to advertise on their website to be a buyer's agent. That's literally their highest. We talked about Zillow before, and their highest level of their top line revenue is actually from using the income from buyer's agents advertising to get your business.
Correct. And so if Zillow doesn't get paid that way, because it can't, because now they're going to negotiate, and it sells like, why am I going to pay you 3%? I'd rather pay you, $1,000 or $2,000 just to do the paperwork. Well, then they got to come up with a different business model, and it's not going to be just giving you this information for free. I think they're going to start charging you, and you're going to have to pay a membership.
Which is why Zillow's tank stocked as well, by the way.
Yeah,
they're tank stocked. So let's be clear that this has been the model of buyer's agents for 40 years now. So back in the 70s, before computers existed or before the internet existed, the value of a buyer's agent was that there's no way for a buyer to find out what inventory was available. Basically, a seller would hire an agent. That agent would write up a listing, essentially, which was a piece of paper. They would deliver it to a central office where the MLS was. And then if you as a buyer wanted to find out what houses were for sale, you would hire a buyer's agent. The buyer's agent would go down to the MLS. They would look through these listings, these pieces of paper. They'd photocopy the pieces of paper that they thought might appeal to you. They'd bring them back and they'd hand you the ones and they'd set up showings. And basically, you couldn't find houses that were listed for sale unless you either drove down to the MLS yourself or you hired a buyer's agent. And so these days, yeah, buyer's agents, I'm not going to say they're not valuable, but the main value that they've provided over the last 40 years up until the internet was they actually helped with discovery of houses that were listed for sale. Now we kind of think of it as that's all done on the internet. I can, as a buyer, I can find out what houses are available. I can find out what they're worth. I can find comps. I can go and look at them myself.
Yeah, but thanks to who though? How you can do that? Thanks to who? How can you do all that stuff for free? Thanks to who? It's not because of you. It's because of Zillow and Redfin and all these, right? And they get paid because you're paying 3% to the buyer's agent.
Well, but now you can argue that the value in the buyer's agent isn't on the front end, it's on the back, well, on the sort of back end, it's on the helping you get through the transaction, representing your legal interests, representing your financial and fiduciary interests, and ensuring that you don't get screwed by the seller and the seller's agent going through the transaction process.
Kyle's going to lose. Kyle's losing it. I can see Kyle exploding right now. Kyle, what's going on?
I'm gonna lose because I got my license. So I went, and so for anybody who doesn't know, you need to take 60 hours. So you basically take 2 weeks and you apparently learn everything you need to know to become what is essentially a legal expert. Because the way it works is you go and you take that 60 hours. And if you want to talk about a racket, first of all, NAR, every single brokerage in our area requires you to become a member of NAR. Every single one. There, like you could find some obscure online brokerage or something that maybe won't require you to have become a realtor, but they require it for it. And the reason they required it is NAR provides the legal documents for processing a transaction. So they give you the templates that you can basically plug and play for the legal documents. And I'm saying legal documents because these are legal documents. So apparently by taking 60 hours of real estate training and then a couple of ethics trainings for NAR, you are now able to create legal documents. Yes, they're templates.
No. They're the MLSs and national local real estate boards, local realtor boards are very clear about the fact that as a real estate agent, you cannot modify those documents. You can't write your own clauses. You can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure, Jay. So I practiced as a realtor for years, and there's always these addendums. There are addendums that are attached on anything, and we literally write anything in that. You can write anything in these addendums and people like take them as law. And so are we recording? Wait, are we recording this? I want to make sure my buddy Kyle doesn't end up in jail. Are we recording this? Is this allowed? I'm not a practicing realtor anymore. So and I only worked for ourselves. So the only people that could sue me for something that I did not in there for representing them is my wife. So I'm pretty safe on this, but literally you could write anything in there. You could be like, this is subject to the deer running across in front of the yard, or I'm not going to buy the property. You could write anything in these addendums, and you're basically practicing law by adding these things to these contracts. And so the way the fact that somebody and I don't want to shit on all realtors because there's a lot of them that are really good and do really good jobs, but 2 weeks of training, you got to pass this test, which you could take as many times as you want. There's no requirement of you passing even the first, second, third time. You could take it as many times as you want, and then you could just go off in the world, take these legal documents, write any amendments that you want, and then just collect your 3% commissions because that's what's standard in the industry. So yes, I do have some issues, Mauricio, with this whole process.
Well, in New York State, you have to have attorney approval. The contract isn't valid until it's approved by an attorney.
Not in Pennsylvania. I was the attorney approving the contracts.
New York is the outlier. New York is the weird one there.
Yeah, I was literally I was considered this transaction can't be done until the expert reviews this. And me, the expert who's taken 60 hours of training, has to go through this, 70-page document and say, oh yeah, this looks great.
So Mauricio, what were they saying though, as to like what it should have been? Like the lawsuit is that they didn't want to pay the buyer's commission. So what were they saying? They just wanted to pay 3% for the sellers?
Yeah, great question. So they believe that as a buyer, right? If I'm buying Jay's house, right, and Kyle's representing, and I go to Kyle and say, hey, represent me in the buying of this house, I should be able to negotiate my own rates with Kyle. I should be able to say, hey, Kyle, I don't even know pay you to find them. I found the freaking property. I'm telling you, I want to buy Jay's property. So I did all the work here. You just freaking be the lawyer and handle my contract. I want to pay you $1,000. I want to pay you $10,000. I want to pay you whatever. And they're saying that was stifled. That stifled the competition. It didn't allow the buyer to negotiate their terms with their broker. It really didn't allow the seller to do the same thing with their broker. And they're basically paying for the buyer who doesn't want the service, and I'm paying for it. And of course, that's all baked into the purchase price, right? So that causes the purchase price to rise, because if it should have been a $100,000 property, well, now it's another $6,000, and I got to put another $6,000 in there into the purchase price. So it artificially inflates not only the commissions, but by definition, the value of the property or the asking price. And so this is huge. I mean, the government's got and I didn't look into the details there. I know they've got an antitrust lawsuit against NAR as well for this exact same reason. So anyway, but the important thing is, that was the allegation, and they agreed. Like the jury agreed. Now, granted, it's just the jury. Everybody's going to appeal it, and this could take years and years to be appealed. And I'm sure at some point it'll get settled. It was interesting that there's two other brokerage houses. I think I forget the names of them, but there was two big brokerage houses that actually settled out of court, way back when, for like compared to the.
I think they did for like 14 million or something, wasn't it?
140 million.
Yeah, pennies on the dollars compared to the 1.78 billion thing.
Yeah, well, and then when they did that settlement, everyone was like, "Oh, they paid way too much." Now they're looking a little better.
Well, here's the thing. So there's an agent down here. I'm in Sarasota, Florida. There's an agent down here who my wife was telling me the story is probably the most hated agent in the city. And it's because when she does a listing as a listing agent, basically she represents the sellers. She basically says 3% to the sellers, and then she marks $1 to the buyer's agent. She's willing to pay the buyer's agent $1. And that's only because the MLS will not allow her to say $0. And she is the most hated agent down here because buyer's agents don't want to work with her because they are not going to get any commission from the seller. If they want to get paid, they need their buyers to pay them. And buyers see these houses on Zillow or Redfin or whatever, and they say to their agent, I want to see this house. And the agent has to show them the house, even though the agent knows they're not going to get paid. And so this agent knows that. She's absolutely hated. And here's the funny thing. The only change that has resulted from this lawsuit is that now the MLS is required to allow her to put in $0 versus $1 for the buyer's agent. And so it is a little bit weird from my perspective that she's a hated agent because she's not willing to pay the buyer's agent. But it just goes to the fact that that's the basis of this lawsuit, is that it's so ingrained in the industry that buyer's agents are supposed to get paid by the seller that if you even suggest that you're not going to do that, you're ostracized.
Well, is she taking the full 6% or maybe that's
well, I mean, even if it's not the full 6%, I mean,
Yeah, that's the point, right? Like, it's like I should be able to negotiate, and I think that's, the way it should work is like if somebody says I want to go see this property, I'm like, hey, if I'm going to show you this property, then I'm going to have to charge you $5,000 or $10,000, whatever the price is.
I mean, I think the crux of all of it is you can negotiate. Like, let's be honest. If you look at you just have to jump through a lot of hoops, and the sellers don't really know because, to your point, it is a bit of a racket that absolutely every single one of these realtors are members of NAR. They all have read the same books. They're all coming from the same school, and they don't want to rock the boat. So they all say, okay, we're going to do a 6% commission. And the way it works, though, is that basically the seller agrees with the seller's agent how much commission they're going to pay total. So it's come down because it was, to Ashley's point, 6% was always 6%. That has come down. So you're seeing 5% a lot. And then the seller actually has the ability to negotiate that, how much they want to do. And they can put in there that they want X amount of dollars to go to the buyer's agent. So they can negotiate that. But most sellers just don't even know that you can negotiate that. There's nothing saying that, like coming out explicitly saying that, okay, you should do it this way. So if you want to be a seller, you can say, hey, I'm only paying you 3% commission. I expect 2% of that to go to the buyer's agent, or I expect 1%, or I expect you not to pay the buyer's agent at all. And the seller's agent has to follow that.
Yeah, and maybe that. I mean, it didn't. I mean, look. I'm not going to get in the weeds in terms of what it said. All I know is that the allegation, right, that was ultimately the jury decided was correct, was that the NAR handbook, right. So the NAR, as you know, Kyle, has a handbook. They have a code of ethics, and that handbook required the home sellers to make a blanket offer to any potential buyer's broker as a condition of listing it on the MLS. Now, to your point, I don't know, what does a blanket offer mean? It's like, hey, I don't have to give you 3%. I'll give you 2% or 1% or whatever. Maybe that was.
Well, this is the $1 versus $0 in our MLS. The fact that you couldn't set it to $0, the minimum was $1. You had to compensate them.
Yeah, maybe that's what the thing.
So what the blanket is saying is that no matter who the buyer agent is, it's the same for whoever that ends up being. As to like a blanket,
right? I mean, there's a form for it. So it was like a BCC or something, buyer's cooperative contract or something. And so
okay, so it couldn't be like, oh, Kyle, you're my friend. You know what? I'll actually give you 3%, but Mauricio, I'm only going to pay you 2.5% if your buyer ends up buying it. Is that what that means?
Yeah, but let's figure out. Let's talk a little bit before we end here. Like what do you think the consequences are going to be? Because I think that's the kind of interesting thing. Let's assume 5 years goes by and it's all upheld and everything. So now it's like they're prohibited, and now everybody's negotiating their terms. Meaning, hey, dude, I don't want to pay you. Because think about it, I have to pay you. Think about how crazy this is. Whether you sell, if you're a broker, if you're a seller's agent, right, and I'm selling a $300,000 home, whatever the median's not for, but let's say a $300,000 home, I'm going to charge you 6%. If I sell a $30 million homes, it's the same thing. It's like, are you really doing 10x more work? So what do you think the consequences are going to be? Are you going to see, if this continues, are you going to see buyers be like, hey guy, I want to pay you an hourly rate. I just need you to prepare the documents. I just need to make sure escrow closes. I want to pay you $5,000, $10,000 for the actual work performed. Is it going to go to hourly or a flat fee? Or what do you guys think would happen if this arrangement went out the books and you no longer had the 6% that's paid by the seller and split? It was like seller negotiates probably 3% for the seller's agent because they're putting on a lot of work. And the buyer says, hey, dude, I've already found the property. I don't need you to go do that work. I just need you to do the paper, make an offer and help me there, and I'll pay you $20,000.
So what we've seen over the last however long is typically if a buyer enters into a contract with the buyer's agent, that contract says that the buyer is going to ensure that the agent is compensated 3%. And so hopefully the seller is paying 3%. In reality, you might look at a house where the seller is only willing to pay 2% or 2.5% to the buyer's agent. What's historically happened is the buyer's agent doesn't require them to come up with the difference. If they go look at a house where the total commission split is 5%, 2.5% to each side, in theory, the buyer should have to come up with the other 0.5% because they've promised contractually to pay the buyer's agent 3%. What historically has happened is the buyer's agent just ignores that 0.5%. They take the 2.5%. Everybody goes goes their separate ways. Everybody's happy. But the reality is now, if a buyer's agent says you're going to have to pay me 3%, and the seller side doesn't pay anything, the buyer's now on the hook. Using your example of a $300,000 home, a buyer's now on the hook for another $9,000 over and above their down payment, their closing costs, their inspection, their appraisal, all those other costs they have to pay. And I think a lot of buyers aren't going to pay that. So one of a few things is going to happen. One, buyers aren't going to use buyer's agents nearly as much. And what they're going to do is they're going to find a home on Zillow. They're going to call the phone number. They're going to get the seller's agent, and they're going to let the seller's agent represent them. And they're going to find that we're going to start to hear stories about buyers getting ripped off because seller agents represent sellers. And seller agents are going to write contracts that favor the sellers, and buyers are going to get screwed because they don't know the process. And they're going to trust this agent who they think is on their side, but is actually on the seller side. And so we're going to start to hear lots of stories.
Honestly, I think it's more of like what's going to close the deal. It's not even the seller side. It could be the agent would be on either side, whatever is going to close the deal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually been part of the problem, is that we talk about buyer's agent. In theory, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the buyer, but in reality, buyer's agents are going to do whatever it takes to get a deal closed because they just want their commission. We think about the fact that, like, we want to pay $290 for a house that the seller's offering $300. That $10,000 difference to the agent's commission is $100. I mean, it's nothing. And so the agent's like, just pay the $300,000. Who cares about the $10,000?
Well, do you think that's but that's the point though. Do you think it's going to change now if that buyer's agent gets paid, by the hour, or just, hey, I'm paying you $5,000 or 10 grand?
I think we're going to see a lot of buyers who get screwed because they don't hire a buyer's agent. They trust the seller's agent. And I think it's going to be really bad for business. I think
I disagree. I think nothing's going to change. You know what's going to change? We're going to have a new form that the NAR is going to provide instead of the buyer's cooperative contract or whatever, and we'll probably have a new section in the standard real estate contract about buyers' commissions. Because here's the problem: we can't have this extra, to your point, $9,000 hitting the buyer side of the transactions. It'll tank the real estate industry. You can't, if you talk about FHA loans, VA loans, all these things, they're all based off of.
They'll just ask for seller credits and the seller will end up paying for it anyway.
Exactly. So all it's going to be is, to your point, yes, they're going to say, okay, the seller can only pay for the seller's commission, the buyer can only pay for the buyer's commission, but every single offer is now going to have the option of saying, okay, this is our offer. Part of the offer is that the seller's paying my buyer's agent commission, and everything's just going to keep going the way it does. The NAR is the biggest lobbyist group in the entire country. They have the most money to fight this, the most money to be able to keep everything just the way that the things are. They are going to do a couple small tweaks, and everything's just going to stay exactly the same.
Yeah, but I think the one thing I'm harping on this, but I think that if that were to happen, the business model for all of these free websites that you think, again, nothing in this life is free, right? You get the free data and info in Zillow and Redfin and whatever your favorite research tool is. That's no longer going to be free. The reason it's quote unquote free is because you're paying it for it in different ways, which is you're paying it through the
people keep hiring the buyer's agents. It's not going to change. Zillow's still going to make all their money off of buyer agents.
Because you're not going to have access to Zillow. How are you going to find the property? You're going to have to go pay Zillow's membership fee, which is now $100 a month.
You're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to go into free Zillow.
There is no free Zillow. It's going to be $100 a month in membership.
No, because Zillow's going to recognize the opportunity.
Zillow's going to stay the exact same. It's going to be free Zillow. You're going to go on. You're going to find your property. You're still going to see your list on the right side of contact these 5 agents to help you out because people are scared. This is the biggest purchase of their life. You're still going to go over. You're going to click on one of those agents. They're going to represent you, and there's just going to be a couple extra forms and line items so that the agents still get paid, and everything's going to stay the same.
I agree with Mauricio here.
I'm gonna love it when when I go into Zillow and they're like, "Oh, sign up for your free account and free," and then I'm gonna be like,
Zillow's free because right now they have to be free.
Check this out. I'm going to be on Instagram. So I'm going to have like Kyle's 30-second clip over here. And then I'm going to have a screen share of Zillow asking me for a free membership. And then they'll charge my credit card.
The moment Zillow changes, then everyone's going to go and use realtor.com because they're going to see the exact same MLS listings on realtor.com.
How is realtor.com going to make money then? It's all business. It's all-
the same way. They're gonna take it from the buyer's agents because the buyer's agents are still gonna make their money. It is a racket.
But they're gonna make less money. They're not gonna make 3%. They're not gonna make 3%. They're gonna make 10 grand instead of 60 grand.
I have a question. How do you think this will affect wholesaling? So Kyle, probably not because you don't think anything is changing, but Mauricio and Jay, do you think this will affect wholesaling at all? Do you think this is a big win for wholesalers? Do you think this will actually put more regulation on wholesaling?
I'm going to defer to Jay. I'm not going to pretend here to know anything about wholesaling. So Jay, you take it away.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to have a big impact. I think at the end of the day, most wholesalers aren't using agents; they're going direct to sellers.
That's what I mean. Do you think more people will actually buy houses from wholesalers?
That's actually an interesting. Oh, okay.
Because they would have like the wholesaler is representing you, doing the paperwork, getting the contract assigned to you. They've negotiated the deal, they've done the work for you and can walk you through the closing.
That's actually a really good point. I hadn't even considered that. But if buyers start to become more self-reliant, start to have more tools out there, whether it's AI or other tools out there that can help them more reliably buy houses and represent their interests without actually hiring a buyer's agent, then yeah, I could see a lot of buyers deciding, hey, I'm willing to go through a wholesaler because this doesn't seem like the buying drugs under a bridge sort of equivalent. Now it's kind of mainstream. I'm used to not having a buyer's agent, and so whether I'm buying from a seller that's represented by an agent or whether I'm buying from a wholesaler, the fact that I don't have an agent isn't so abnormal anymore. So yeah, I think that's actually a very reasonable question.
All right, do we have some silly top 10 thing to go through?
You want to move on from this? All right, fair enough. We can move on. I could shit on NAR again.
Can I point out that in 2008, I was a member of the only MLS in the country that didn't require a NAR membership. So I was a real estate agent. My wife was a real estate agent in 2008, and I also was not a member of NAR. And I was one of the very few people in the country that was the case.
And you could not call yourself a realtor.
I could not call, and it was made very clear to me that I could not call myself a realtor.
How did you get your real estate docs?
Do you think, are there actually people that care about that these days? Like, I know that is a thing, but I've never heard someone say I'm hiring them because they are a realtor.
Because everyone's a realtor. They just don't know the difference.
So with respect to the real estate docs, the state of Georgia, and this was in Georgia, this was a big MLS in Georgia, the state of Georgia had their own docs that were separate from the NAR docs, the NAR docs. And so we were not allowed to use the NAR docs if we were not members of NAR, but we could still use the Georgia docs. And I actually thought the Georgia docs were better. And so I was surprised at the time that it was the only MLS that allowed that. But I suspect that's going to be one of the big changes moving forward. I have a feeling that a lot of MLSs are going to break free from NAR. I heard and I know we're finishing this up, but just real quick, I read a statistic or read an opinion today that 1.5 million members of NAR, it's possible that if the MLSs decide to break free from NAR, that potentially 2/3 of them, 1 million out of the 1.5 million, could relinquish their NAR membership. So in a worst case, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but in a worst case, this could be kind of a death knell for NAR.
Was it Redfin that already pulled out of NAR? I think they're the one MLS that isn't. Yeah.
You know what the third quarter market share of Redfin homes were? 0.78%. Redfin, this market disruptor, Redfin's showing up. They're going to disrupt the whole NAR business model. 0.78%. Just throwing out. You want to know the one statistic?
He's so angry.
The one statistic everyone should care about. My top 10 biggest lobbyists as per how much money spent last year on lobbying. Number one. Who do you think number one is?
FTX.
What is
Sam Friedman, whatever his name is.
What do you think number one is?
You already told us what it was, Kyle.
NAR, number one, 84.11 million. You know what number two is?
A pharmaceutical company.
Elon Musk.
Big Pharma.
U.S. Chamber of Commerce that has over 3 million businesses who are a member of U.S. Chamber of Commerce. NAR spends more than those 3 million businesses, and that they have 81.94 million in lobbyists. Then it drops off a cliff to number three is, to your point, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America is all the way down at 25.9 million. So that just gives you perspective of how much money NAR has for lobbying, for their influence. But lobbying influence that has nothing to do with the U.S. and politics. Lobbyists have very little influence, so I wouldn't worry about that. Number 4, American Hospital Association. Number 5, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Number 6, Facebook. Number 7, American Medical Association. Number 8, Amazon. Number 9, Business Roundtable, which I didn't look that up. I don't know what that is. And then number 10 is Comcast. So
interesting. I'm surprised the oil companies aren't up there.
Yeah, and we get down to Comcast is there. So at the bottom, that's 14.4 million. And I looked up because I was strange. I'm like, the NRA is not in there. NRA is only at about 5 million as far as lobbyist dollars spent.
So wait, the NRA only spends $5 million a year in lobbying?
I guess so.
It's they're losing membership left and right. They're actually.
I think Drunk Real Estate could syndicate more than 5 million, and we could start lobbying some major stuff.
For sure, we could.
Saying 5 million,
15 million gets us in the top 10.
We could just go on Ashley's podcast and probably raise 5 million for the good cause.
Well, we got to get at least in the top 10. Like, there's no point if you're going to go small.
What's going to be the initiative? What are you going to lobby for?
We're lobbying for more alcohol on podcasts.
Kyle to be the president of NAR.
Anti-NAR. All right. Let's go quick game here. We'll do vacations. Would you rather never be able to go to the same place twice on vacation, or always have to go to a different place every time you go on vacation? Mauricio.
Wait, say that one more time?
You can never go to the same place twice. So every time you go on vacation, you have to go to a different place, or you always have to go to the same location.
Do I like can I pick the location?
You can pick whatever location you want.
I'd rather do the location.
What is it?
I don't know, but whatever it is, I want to keep. I'm a creature of habit. So if I find something that me and my family love, I'd rather do that. Like, for example, we do a yearly Big Bear trip. We've got this great house in the lake. We bring all our extended family, and that's an amazing time. I'd rather do that every year than go, I don't know, never be able to go there again. I'm like, no, I'd rather do the same one over and over again.
That's your one. You can't go anywhere else.
That's good, man. Big Bear in the summer.
Big Bear, you're in, huh?
Lake house on the lake house in the summer ain't too bad.
Fair enough. Jay?
Yeah, I'm a creature of habit. I don't want to have to find a new place because I'd be pissed if I found a good place I liked and I couldn't go back. So same place every year.
Really? All right. Ashley, you going to dissent here, or are you going to follow up?
I almost changed my answer based off of theirs because, yes, like a lake house, I could consistently go to a lake house all the time in the same one. But and there is this place in Florida that we actually have gone to probably like 8 times in the last 2 years with the kids. And it's like every time we love it. It's great. It's consistent. We know everything to do. And like that would be my only persuasion to going to the same place, is that you just become more efficient and effective at your vacation, where if you go to somewhere new, you have to figure out where to eat, what to do. But I'm going to still have to say a new place every time.
Yeah, I feel like that the first answer is like such an American answer, where like people are like, oh, I'm happy with America. Let's just stay in America. We only go to one place. We're fuck everywhere else. Versus like if you go to Europe, like people would lose their minds if they had to go to the same place all the time. They travel different countries. They do all this stuff. And to your point, there's lots of lakes. There's lots of houses with lots of lakes, and there's lots of places to check out. So I'm definitely doing that. But
what if you get stuck one year on a place? Like, you get to pick every year, or do you just like it's like a random like, hey,
yeah, you get to pick. You just can't go to the same place you've already been before.
Mauricio really way overthinks these things.
That's why I don't like him, because that's just my nature. Like I gotta give the peeps,
His 2-hour walk tomorrow morning is going to be contemplating.
The problem is you guys don't take this seriously enough. And so I take it so seriously that it just weighs on me.
I don't know. You were the one who you picked to go to the same place, but then you didn't even have a place like picked out. So I feel like you're the one who didn't take it seriously. I'm
really drunk right now. Just had to throw that out there.
So Jay, you said one place. What would be your place? So if you had to pick right now, what's your place?
Sushi with anywhere that sushi is served with Mauricio.
Oh, no doubt. Last 5 or 6 years, at least once a year, we've gone to the Dominican Republic, an all-inclusive, and we've tried a number of different all-inclusives in the DR, but probably would pick one of those places, either the Hard Rock or a place called the Royalton in the Dominican Republic. This is not my plug because you did ask the question.
Do you want to tell us your affiliate link for the discount?
Exactly.
I wish I could get an affiliate link. Actually, you know what? I've kind of fallen in love with Cancun, which is crazy because I didn't go to Cancun until I was like 28 years old, because it was always the stigma. Cancun's this like, spring break place. All the college kids goes there. And like, I was like, oh, that's not classy enough for me. But then my buddy had a timeshare that he was giving away, couldn't use. And Ashley, we'll go. So we went to Cancun, and like, we go back like almost every other year, because it's so easy to get to. They have it down. They know like tourism's their thing. They have it down. I could be on the beach from Philadelphia in 5 hours. I can leave my house. I could be on the beach in Cancun in 5 hours, and there's so many options.
So you can only do that once, then you can't do that ever again.
Well, that's true, but weighing it off, I'd rather try different places. There's lots of places
So Cancun is once, and then that's it. You wouldn't be able to go to the big. I don't know if it's public.
Bigger Pockets Conference 2024 will be in Cancun.
You wouldn't be able to go to the Bigger Pockets. Yeah, you won't be able to hang out with Ashley in the Bigger Pockets crowd.
I sat it out this year and I survived though, so I think I'll be okay. But I am gonna make it.
So my wife just texted me and asked me if I'm coming home soon. So what time is it? It's like pitch black out there. It's 5:40.
All right, we can wrap this up. Well, yeah, because my drink is gone. But we do have to do special thanks for Ashley for joining us. It was let's do a rattle, a drink rattle for us. I don't know if you finished your drink or not, but
I did, but I just have a cinnamon stick left. No, I excused rattle.
Well, we really appreciate you making the trip to join us, and we hope you come back again soon.
Well, don't worry, Kyle. I will be at your house, at your front door in 3 days. So,
What do you have to plug, Ashley?
So yeah, that's. I guess we shouldn't skip plugs. What's something you want to plug? Get some value out of this.
Yeah, sure. I'll plug my books, The Real Estate Partnerships and Real Estate Rookie. You can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or the Bigger Pockets bookstore. And I do have a code, Ashley, you can put in for 10% off.
All right, Jay, you got a book you want to plug too, or you got something else?
I'm going to plug, I've been sitting here thinking since Ashley's discussion of VAs in the Philippines, our editor for this podcast, who is also the editor for all the Bigger Pockets podcasts, is in the Philippines. So I'm going to give a plug to Dave and his team, the editor for this podcast. We record on Tuesday evening, and he has this released by Wednesday morning. So thank you, Dave. Anybody that's looking for a great podcast editor, go to podcastengineers.com.
Whoa. Do we really want to do this? Because if he gets flooded with all this, like this business, he might not have time to do our podcast.
He will recognize that we're the ones that generated all this business, and he will be even more loyal to us. And we love you, Dave. Thank you.
Or he'll be like, all these other ones are really growing, but you guys are still stuck.
Ouch.
I only had to do that. I only had to do that because of the opening of you guys talking in the beginning.
Well, can you at least help out? Like you gotta plug your appearance on this podcast when you go back when you go back to your real podcasts, your real jobs over there. You got to plug this one for us.
I know.
Podcastengineers.com.
All right, Mauricio, you got a live or something you want to plug?
No. I mean, since one of you, I won't say which one. One of you is a client. I'm gonna keep plugging the Real Estate Rookie podcast, not only with Ashley but with Tony Robinson. Amazing podcast on the Bigger Pockets brand. If you have not checked that out, give it a look, subscribe, and amazing stuff there. So the Real Estate Rookie podcast.
Double plug for Ashley, and she plugged at the beginning. Ashley. Triple plug for Ashley, and I'm going to plug another Ashley. So this is just Ashley's getting plugged all episodes. So I'm gonna plug my wife again. Follow her, Badash Investor, in Instagram. She posted a controversial topic the other day that got a huge traction. So go comment on whether or not she's being an asshole with her last post.
Why I married Kyle Wilson? Was that the top? I forgot. Was that?
That's not controversial. That's it's obvious. But yeah, go check her out on Instagram and leave a comment on whether or not she should have been posting what she was posting there. So yeah, my drink is gone. Thanks again, Ash, for joining us.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, guys.
For the rest of you, I will see you next Tuesday.